Truth Talks. Please, I'm excited about the Truth Talks. They are addressing true fellowship and what it means, what true fellowship and corporate worship looks like according to the Bible.
I will sing to the old rugged cross and exchange it someday for a crown.
To choose them to begin with, to show other nations what?
His sovereignty.
His sovereignty. Okay. And stuff. Now, thinking about his sovereignty, somebody, what did y'all see something there when it said there? I saw this great word and it said when you go in to possess it. He didn't say if, he said when. And when.
It's
Verse
a set
2.
time.
Go ahead.
There's a set time for them to go, but God has a plan in which he's preparing them. And when they get there, certain things are expected of them to do to obey him so that they can remain in that land.
Now, also, yeah, you shaking a pen? Okay, I'll get to you in a minute. But think about this, first, remember what he said also in the opening part, is that they are greater and mightier than you, right?
Mm-hmm.
Okay. In other words, they bring to mind here when you talk about that. What is this? One of the verses in New Testament talking about? Nothing is impossible for who? God. Okay, no matter what, they're greater and mightier. And when they're greater and mightier, what happens? People tend to what? To draw back. Again, this is where they will have to what? Be reminded. Yes, they're greater and mightier than you. That's one reason that you ended up wandering, because you didn't want to have faith in me to begin with, to go in there when I first gave you the opportunity to go in there. And so that's what it said, they're greater and mightier. And whereas God said, Israel, you're going to face this challenge, right? But because I have already delivered them in hand, all you have to do is obey me. Okay. Anybody else? Go ahead, Omar. I saw you smiling again.
It just brings to mind that one of my prayers is that I continue to see myself as God sees me and others as well, right? So these same people, when they were going to go into the promised land, they came back with a report that the land was full of giants. And there was two things they said. They talked about how big the giants were and how massive they were. And that's one thing they saw. But they also said that we look like grasshoppers in their sight. That was their report. And my question to that text was, when did they have a conversation with the giants to ask them how they looked in their sight? They assumed because the giants were that large that the giants looked at them and said, oh, they're so small. But the longest story short, BJ, we have to find a way by his grace and by his spirit to always agree with God on how he sees us.
Anybody got a comment on that one?
For me,
Go ahead.
I like to, as you think about how they assume how they appeared, when you're thinking about the way you appear to God and the way he accepted us and brought us in to deliver us from the sins, how is it that you say, okay, you belittling yourself on something God told you to go and do? That's pretty much what I'm trying to say.
If I got an answer for him on that one?
No,
it was the task ahead.
The task ahead.
So we've all, I can't speak absolute, but most of us have been in a situation where we look at a task ahead and we look at like, man, that's just too big of a project. That's just too big for us to overtake. That's just too big for us to do. We need more people to handle it. So you think he sent out the 12, they came back, only 2 saw the task as doable. The rest saw the task as too big. Therefore, when they broke it down, it was more saying these people in just tasks of what we're trying to do to accomplish that. It was metaphorically and it was actual physical, because those people were larger than the Hebrews at the time. So it was exactly what they were saying. The task is too big, but also the people feel like they're bigger than us. They were men of battle. Those were kingdoms that were established. How can we, coming out of the wilderness, be ready to take on such giants, such huge tasks? They talked about the food of the land, how big it was. We're not ready for such a big commitment. And that's where God was like, yeah, you are, because it's me who's going with you.
Hmm.
It was basically telling them that your problems are big, but God is bigger. And that's why he punished the 10. And the 2 was like everybody else, you're good.
Well, he punished the whole thing.
Well,
But it's a good point. It's a good point there and understanding that. But see, there's a key word in there that I know y'all got on the tip of your tongue. Okay, well, it's 2 words: trust and faith. Okay, trust and faith, and a third, obedience. See, whenever we are tasked with doing something, if God puts something in front of us, we need to do what? We have to have faith, we have to trust him, and we need to just obey him. And see, that's what we got right there. Yes, sir.
Another thing about at that particular time is that, and Amari touched on it, he said, when did they have conversations with them to see how they viewed the Israelites? And the other thing is that it just showed how far the Israelites had to come. Because, just for instance, say the Israelites was on the other side of it, that's what they're telling you, that's what they would have thought. That's what they would have thought about the Israelites had they been on the other side. I would have looked at me as a grasshopper. That's what they were saying. Because they didn't conversate with them to see, to verify that. What they were telling God is that they looking at me like grasshopper.
Well, remember, they measured 9 foot, over 9 foot tall. Okay.
And so what? What they were expressing their fear.
Right.
It wasn't so much as it was mistrust and disobedience, but they were showing their fear because they were getting ready to go into battle. These were established nations. They didn't know anything about battle. That's why God had to fight their battles.
Mm-hmm.
They were in bondage for 400 years. They weren't, soldiers.
He had to develop them as an army. He had to develop them as go forth and understand it.
And that's part of the thing where God says, I will deliver them up to you.
Mm-hmm.
All you have to do is smite them.
In other words, it's not on your own. It's not on your own strength. It's on the strength of me.
Right.
Okay.
Because they weren't warriors.
And it's what they saw on the New Testament. I think it's in Romans. We walk by faith and not by sight.
Mm-hmm.
See, it's what they saw made them shrink back. And I can't preach to this, but I wonder if the group of people that was getting ready to go in was the same group of people who saw the sea divided, if they'd have felt the same way. You see what I'm saying?
I got what
Because they hadn't saw such a great miracle, but he mentions continually here about bringing them out of Egypt. Now, I'm quite sure the story might have been told, but these people, nobody but Caleb and Joshua and Moses saw that. Everybody else had died off, saw this great miracle. So to trust God the way he wants us to and them to, that's something we grow into.
Right.
We all, like he was saying, the task at hand, we all have to grow into such faith of where we can, I don't want to say let go and let God, but just move forward as God would have us and trusting he's going to do what he said he's going to do. But at the same time, we're called to do our part. Like they was called to go in and they was called to battle. That it was called to also work where God was going to be before them. So that was a problem. I think they hadn't experienced what the people had died off that experience, but Joshua and Caleb and Moses was sure it could be done. But he was constantly teaching these people about the sovereignty of God.
Right. And that's what Moses was doing. That's what Moses was taking the time now, his last bit of breath right now. In these chapters right here, his breath was look, I'm telling you this story. I'm bringing it back because you were not around for the dividing of the sea. You were not around for everything that's here, this wandering for 38 years and stuff, because we came in here with 2 point so many million. Okay? But out of them, everybody 20 and over are not here no more because they did not obey me. Okay, and so Moses is bringing them in there, and and it's a good point there. You made a statement last week. You're saying that it was dripping. You know, things were dripping of honey. Everything was gigantic and everything like that. But also, the commandment that he gave them to do what he needed to do to conquer them was one of the words he said, destroy them. Now, did he say destroy some? Why?
He didn't want them in
They
the
had to
marriage.
destroy them. They had to destroy all the idols, the altar. He didn't want any reminder of who lived in that land.
And destroy their gods.
Destroy the gods. Destroy everything that was what? That would be
A
what?
reminder of
Reminder of
those
everything that's
people.
bad.
Or a distraction to them obeying God.
That's the part there. Go ahead.
The whole verse is speaking in absolutes. Utterly destroy.
Right. Utter.
Tear down to nothing. Wipe out the enemy. You know, may put them under ban, and then while they're under ban, decrease their numbers. So the whole thing was God showing to his people his utter power over those that they believe had power over his people. And he even, when he reaffirmed to them the 6, 7, and 8, it was a real affirmation like, I didn't choose you for your power. I chose you because it was my choice of my promise, which was an absolute that God made a long time ago. So to bring everything back to what he was telling them in the beginning, he showed him his final absolute of why. This is a promise. I'm not giving this to you because you did something great. I'm showing you the power I have because my power is absolute in what I do, and my power is absolute in my promise to your father.
Yes. Good point there. Good point there. And so we see that now. All is here. If y'all look at the next verses 12 through 15, they talk about what happens if they obeyed him. What they got to say again? Promises. Okay. You know, the blessings are there. Okay. But he made one statement in there. Somebody read verse 15. I want to pick up on verse 15 there.
Read out the NASB.
Mm-hmm.
The Lord will remove from you all sickness, and he will not put on you any of the harmful diseases of Egypt, which you have known, but he will lay them on all who hate you.
In other words, this is what he's saying. We understand what he's saying right there. He's talking about the diseases he laid on who? Now, is he talking about the plagues or he's talking about something else?
No, he's talking about something else.
Yeah. Did y'all catch that? He's talking about something else. What else is he talking about? Think about this.
Dysentery.
Does everybody know what dysentery is? Well, there's a difference between them, but dysentery is diarrhea. It's the same effect. In other words, the illnesses and sicknesses there is worse. Now think about this. They've been out here, right? How many years? 40. Yeah. And they're healthy, are they not? What have they been eating? Vitamins and all that, right? No, manna. Manna, which is what? Well, they ate quail because they got tired of manna, right? And then they got tired of quail because it was too much for them. Okay, in other words, God gave them what they asked for, right? And what happened? Complain. Remember, it's either 8 or whatever, it's talking about their stiff neck. Okay? But think about this. He said, if you obey me, this is what's going to happen. And then he said, this is what's going to happen to those that hate you. Now, would that be the Canaanites? Be all of them, wouldn't it? All the nations, okay? In other words, talking about all those nations. You say again?
All 7 nations.
All 7 nations. Because he gave them 7 to get rid of, right? Okay. So you can see that this is a blessing. If they obey God, he will not let them, and he has not let them be sick or ill out there. Well, let's rephrase that. If they disobeyed him while they were wandering, they did get their chastisement out there. Okay, so anybody, anything else on chapter 7? I mean, there's a lot of things there. Yeah, chapter 7. Anything else in chapter 7 that y'all stuck out of y'all's mind?
Well, I think you kind of touched on it, but God gives us, as his people, he gives us very clear and concise instructions when it comes to how we're to deal with the world, right? And how we're to deal with our enemies. And I think we see that in there. You can kind of look at the people outside of the nation as the world. And then you can also look at them as enemies, because God says things like, I will utterly destroy them. But he also says, I want you not to intermingle. So there's one thing that there is kind of dichotomy. God gives us instructions that he's going to carry out when it comes to our enemies, and then he gives us instructions on how we're to engage with the world. Like for us, it's be not conformed to this world, but be you what? Transformed by the renewing of your mind. Those same concepts are there in the Old Testament and how he commands them to deal with enemies and with the world or others.
Go ahead, Alita.
In verse 18, it says,
Verse 18.
18,
Go ahead.
it says, you shall not be afraid of them. And the emphasis is on that, because for them to be afraid is bringing doubt in their minds of who their God is. Because you can know God intellectually, but when it comes to knowing him with your heart, then the doubt shouldn't be there. The fear shouldn't be there.
Read the rest of 13, because this is very important. 18. Go ahead, read the rest
18?
of 18, yes.
You shall not be afraid of them, but you shall remember well what the Lord your God did to Pharaoh and to all the Egyptians.
He keeps, that's what I'm saying, he keeps bringing up
Mm-hmm.
Egypt. He just keeps bringing it up through here, and there's a reason why he keeps doing that.
Go over 19. We'll get to
The great trials which your eyes saw, the signs and the wonders and the mighty hand and the outstretched arms by which the Lord your God brought you out, so shall the Lord your God do to all the people of whom you are afraid.
What's he doing? He's telling them again, I will take care of it. Okay. You got something else you
Yeah,
want?
Egypt was an impossibility.
Yes,
There was no way they could have got out of Egypt.
Mm-mm.
You know, I mean, it was too much water to cross over. You know, there was no way. And when they got to where they thought there was no way out, and Pharaoh's army was coming, they thought they were dead people. You know, but God showed them, and he showed Pharaoh, what's impossible with you, you know, it's not impossible with me. He keeps bringing up Egypt for a reason. Now, if I delivered you from Egypt, you know, this is just a menial task I'm going to do for you here. Because one, you're not slaves. You've been following me this far. You were disciplined in the desert. I'm telling you, I'm before you. We're going before people. You know, remember Egypt, you know, when you had no way. Now you have a way.
Now think about this. As they conquered nations, as they conquered people, what was they doing? Other nations saw what was going on, did they not? As a message going out ahead of them. But Amar had to hit on something that now I got to go back to it. Somebody read verse 3. You said Ingle right, Mar? Go ahead. Somebody hit verse 3.
NASB.
Verse 3
That's
chapter
fine.
7?
7, chapter 7, verse 3. Because Amari hit on something. I want to go back and make sure we take care of that part there.
Furthermore, you shall not intermarry with them. You shall not give your daughters to their sons, nor shall you take their daughters for your sons.
Therefore, you had to what? Utterly destroy them. You had to get rid of them. Okay? And stuff. Y'all, go ahead.
Tells you why, because
Go ahead, finish it.
because you know verse 4 says, "For they will turn your sons away from following me to serve their gods. Then the anger of the Lord will be kindled against you, and he will quickly destroy you." So
Now,
that's what he's telling his people.
yes, his own people. In other words, this is a command. This is what you're not to do. But if you do, this is what's going to happen to you. Yeah. I had to go back to that because Mark popped it in my head when he said, do not intermingle.
Yeah.
This
And,
other stuff. Go ahead.
I've seen some pastors take this passage and teach interracial marriage. And that's not what this is
No, that's
teaching.
not what this is about.
Okay. This passage can be mimicked today in the sense that God's people today shouldn't marry
Unequally yoked.
unequally yoked. This is what they were doing here. And you can see the same thing there because Solomon made the great mistake as well. Even they say he was the wisest man in the world.
Mm-hmm.
When he had all the concubines, what happened? He let them bring their shrines over. They did the same thing in Babylon. They married. And then when they was freed, they brought the women and children back. God says, send them back. So God never wanted his people, even today, to intermarry with people that are not his people because of the same reason.
Yes. Anyone else?
You started to say something, and then you went back to
Go ahead.
you had mentioned about about how their numbers grew and they won battles. He actually talks about that in 22. That he gives them that warning, that same exact warning. He says the beast of the field. But that's also more symbolism to where as they grew, the power around them grew, and he said that it would be too numerous for them.
The beast did. Yes,
Right.
the beast.
For you.
You go right. I was getting ready to go. Yeah, good. Thank you.
So even though it was a warning of even though my power is great, for you, you have to pace yourself little by little. Because if I wipe them all out, then he goes back and he reminds them when he gets to verse 8, in chapter 8 about how fast power can come and it can corrupt. So if you become too great, it's for you. You'll have, he goes to talk about how they'll gain riches and how then gold and power will become their idols and they get too big for them. So he even gave them a pre-warning in 7 of things he was going to warn them further in 8.
8. Yes, and then in 9. And, because it's dealing with what? Your pride, and you move forward in that. And I like the verse that you brought up, 22. Has everybody read that verse there?
Mm-hmm.
You want to read out into the here and there? 7:22.
King James Version.
Actually, start at 21 because it's very key right here. 21. Go ahead.
King James Version. The Lord, thou shalt not be offended at them, for the Lord thy God is among you, a mighty God in terror. And the Lord thy God will put out the nations before thee, little by little, and thou mayest not consume them at once, lest the beast of the field increase upon thee.
2 numbers for you. In other words, little by little, small by small. In other words, you cannot consume all at once.
Because it'll go back to a primitive state.
Yes. Primitive, meaning what?
Primitive.
Just a bit primitive. Okay, in other words, it revert back to what? Wild, everything is all over the place. And stuff. So, and that was the key right there. And to finish up this chapter here, verse 25 again reiterates something that he wanted to make sure they understands. In verse 25 says this right here: you should burn the carved images of their gods with fire. You should not covet the silver or gold that is on them, nor take it for yourself, lest you be snared by it, for it is an abomination to the Lord your God. Nor shall you bring any abomination to your house, which we saw that happen in Joshua chapter 7, but that's down the road. Okay. Into your house, lest you be doomed to destruction like it. You shall utterly detest it, and utterly abhor it, for it is a cursed thing. In other words, in chapter 7, he just wanted to finish it up the way he started. You're going to destroy them. You're going to cut them out. You're going to take care of them. Get rid of them. Do not get infested by their gods or anything that they have. Any question on chapter 7? Any other statements on 7 that anyone saw?
Yeah, I see those 2 words that we kind of touched on. They're using the same verse, chosen and holy, right?
Yes.
So we know that God chose Israel to choose a nation. He wants a holy people, right? And that speaks of their character. It speaks of our character. And it speaks of us being an example to others, to reveal God's character in the world, whether they submit to him or not. But even when we had chosen and then we have holy, BJ, he still is letting you know that even though I chose a group of people, it's individuals' faith that matters. Each individual within that nation that he chose, like the church, right? That's a group of people. We're all a part of the group, but we're only a part of the group because of our individual faith in the Lord Jesus Christ. So I just wanted to bring out chosen and holy so we can see the larger picture and the smaller picture of
In other words,
his
being
choice.
set apart.
Yeah.
Okay, we're being set apart. The nation was set apart from other nations because it was chosen, but it was also holy itself. Any other comments or questions on that one? Yes, ma'am.
Just back to verse 2,
Okay.
where he said to not show them any mercy. You know, destroy them and do not show mercy. Yet at times, you know, we disobey God and think we're more merciful than him.
Good point there. More merciful than him. That's a good point there. In other words,
Sylvia.
go ahead. We say mine?
No,
Oh, Sylvia, right?
Yes.
Okay. In other words, a good point there. In other words, we tend to what? Try to show them compassion when God said, do not show them compassion. Okay? In other words, if God tells you to do something, you did what? You're supposed to do it. Yeah.
It
Go ahead.
goes to show how God can use one nation to be a switch to another nation.
Oh, yes.
So it wasn't that Israel was great. That's why he gave them the land. It's that the Canaanites were wicked. So he was punishing them. And he used Israel as a switch to the Canaanites for their wickedness. And that's why he said destroy them.
Destroy and don't show them any mercy.
Right.
Yes. And if they had showed them mercy, as Sylvia said, if they showed them, what would happen to them? That's disobedience. And he
That's-
already said, I will take care of you with the passage where we just read.
Same thing happened. I forgot who they went to fight against. Anyway, he told them don't take any booty, anything,
and
and
Joshua.
they took it. And then they went to fight a small nation like
And got
Ai.
their- Yeah, AI, and they got their
whipped for
butt
the very
creamed.
thing. So
I'm sorry, I didn't mean to use that word, but they got it.
that wasn't the first time he did it, but here he's telling them the same thing
Yes.
before then, is don't take anything, because see, they make trinkets out of it and everything else, and kill everybody.
Now they did, they had good gold mines and stuff there too, right? Copper mines, gold mines, all that.
We do the same thing today. I mean, we go to foreign countries, we fight wars, and what do they tell us? Don't take anything. Sometimes people take money and everything else, try to ship it back. But if you look at it,
Called
really,
contraband.
we got our strategy. If you really look at the strategy of the military, a lot of it comes from strategy of Scripture, and a lot of the do's and don'ts. We kind of fall it in the way. I don't know if they intentionally do that, but if you think about it, it can be dangerous doing certain things.
But the thing is that this chapter here is saying, conquer and obey. If you don't obey, you can't conquer. Trust me, it's already taken care of. I'm with you. What is greater than you, I'm greater than they are. Okay. Anything else before we move to chapter 8? I need to get a drink. Yes, ma'am. Sylvia. Go ahead, no problem.
Chapter 9,
Excuse me.
just listening about what he was talking about, our identity. And a lot of people don't really know God of the Bible. They know about God, or they go try to learn God from other people, but they never read the Bible for themselves. So like verse 9, I mean, he's constantly reminding people over and over, reminding them of what he has done for them. And verse 9 in the New King James, it says, therefore, know that the Lord your God, he is God, the faithful God, who keeps covenant and mercy for 1,000 generations with those who love him and keep his commandments.
Love and obey. Very good point. In other words, again, he's laying them out there for it. All we got to do is what? He's laying. Go ahead.
I'm gonna say,
Excuse me for a second. I can't get some water.
That's why in chapter 6, he said, keep it in your remembrance and teach it forth. Because it's like we said, the generation prior was gone, and now the current generation needs to be reminded. That's why Moses kept his journal.
This one said, teach your children. Yes, teach your children, continue moving forward. And that's how we are to do as parents, is to do what? Teach our children. And stuff, so. Sorry about that.
You know, and back to Egypt again. Like I said, he keeps mentioning it, and they were in a situation, like I said before we started here, that there's no way they could have gotten themselves out of it. And so we're looking back hindsight, and we say, well, you know, after they saw what God did, how could they turn around and do this? God, when he created man to be able to make choices and reason. You know, of course, that's what God does. And so it is no different today. If we really understood the depravity, our separation from God, in bondage not to Egypt, but in bondage to sin. That's why I told everybody, try to get that book, The Bondage of the Will. If we really understood the depth of depravity, we wasn't bad off. We was as bad off as we can be. I don't care what situation you get in life. To be apart from God, that is the worst. And when we come into the Lord, that's something we have to grow in, because we can't learn that when we are not in the Lord. We can't learn how steep we are in sin. Now, they knew when they was in Egypt, they was not free. Some of them was born there, so some of them might have thought they was born to be slaves. But it was after the release of Egypt when they can look back and say, whoa, God pulled us out of a situation that there's no way we can get out of that. And so like us, once we are saved and we go back and study and understand that we were enemies with God, we hated God, we didn't have no peace, we was at war with God, we was by nature children of wrath. What does that mean looking forward? And realize that there was no way that we can be in the spirit that we in now apart from sin, but God. Not but God in us, but God and God alone. He tells them, he say, I brought you out with the stretched out arm and with the mighty hand, not me and Moses. You know, so it was the same way that they were in Egypt, that we can look back hindsight now and really understand the condition that we was in. Now, just like they disobeyed after knowing the situation they was in Egypt, we say, how can they do that? Really, we kind of mimic the same thing today in this progressive sanctification.
Right.
You know, because as we grow and we learn and we are being sanctified continuously, we learn those things, we realize, and just like their faith was shallow and trusted God, and so all of us are the same way in some aspect of our Christian walk. And so we're still growing in that trust and in faith in the Lord to do certain things.
It goes back to the point Sylvia made when you read verse 9. It says, know that your Lord, your God, he is God. And if you don't have a relationship and understanding and don't read God's word, you cannot develop that for us. Back then, it was what the forefathers were teaching their children about God, who he was and what he did for them. And Moses was reiterating as it brings it forth. And so it's always a continuous understanding or teaching of who God is, how great God is,
how great he is, yes,
and how, you know, how powerful he is, how sovereign he is, and coming in that relationship that you have and you develop with him. Okay, that goes back to what he was dealing with Israel, is the same example he gives us for us here today. I'm not going to tap date.
I think even in the New Testament, Paul even mentions Egypt. You know, he said that experience will be remembered through all generations. I don't think there's no nation or no generation that don't know about what happened in Egypt. You know, and there eventually should be no person that's in the Lord that don't understand the position that we were in before we got saved and how we got out of that position.
Look at Acts chapter 7. Since you want to talk about Egypt. Actually, it's talking about disobedience and stuff like that. Stephen is doing what? He's giving that wonderful sermon.
Acts 7?
A loving sermon. Yes, right? It's chapter 7, isn't it?
Were they stoned him?
Oh, yeah, they got rid of him.
Yeah, Stephen, yeah.
Okay, Stephen is taking them all the way back to the Old Testament, bringing it forward, telling them how they came about. And we'll finish up this evening. And it's, understand that he's preaching to them or doing a sermon. He's telling them things that they don't want to hear. And that what causes him to get stoned and understand. But look at verse 7. I think it said, "In the nation to whom they will be in bondage, I will judge," said God. "And after that, they shall come out and serve me in this place." Okay. Acts chapter 7, verse 7.
Oh.
You were Acts what? Acts 1?
Do you want to start at verse 6?
Yeah, start at verse 6. You want to read it?
Okay, let me start at verse 5, I guess it'll make sense.
Yeah, verse 5 is fine. Acts chapter 7, verse 5.
I read on NESB.
Okay.
"But he gave him no inheritance in it, not even a foot of ground, and yet even when he had no child, he promised that he would give it to him as a promise and to his descendants after him." Verse 6. "But God spoke to this effect, that his descendants would be aliens in a foreign land, and that they would be enslaved and mistreated for 400 years, and whatever nation to which they would be in bondage, I myself would judge, said God. And after that, they will come out and serve me in this place. And he gave him the covenant of circumcision, and Abraham became the father of Isaac and circumcised him on the 8th day. And Isaac became the father of Jacob, and Jacob of the 12 patriarchs. And the patriarchs became jealous of Joseph, those his brothers, okay, and sold him into Egypt."
And then you jump to verse 17.
Okay, well, we can just
Go, keep going.
Okay. Egypt. Yet God was with him and rescued him from all his afflictions and granted him favor and wisdom in the sight of Pharaoh, king of Egypt. And he had made him governor over Egypt and all the household. We'll drop down to 17.
Yeah. Y'all can read the rest of that, but it's dealing with Joseph.
Okay, yeah.
17.
But as the time of the promise was approaching, which God has assured to Abraham, the people increased and multiplied in Egypt. Until there arose another king over Egypt who knew nothing about Joseph. Of course, that's when he said there began to be too many for us.
He
Let's
enslaved
round
them.
them up and make slaves. Because he didn't know Joseph.
Right. Yeah. And so that's where they got enslaved. That's where everything started. And that's where they were in Egypt and had to be brought out of Egypt. Yeah. Just like Jesus, well, Mary and Joseph had to go into Egypt
To fulfill process and he'll come out of Egypt.
to come out of Egypt.
Yeah. And I just want to mention that Egypt is shown from Old Testament to New Testament continuously because, you know, the Lord don't want even us to forget Egypt, even though we wasn't personally there.
So, yeah, even if you get a chance, just read Acts chapter 7 when Stephen is talking to him, because again, it reiterates what we just talked about, how they had Egypt, how they came out of Egypt, and how it's continue to remember how God is and how powerful God is and why he did what God had to do. Yeah, he had planned. Any other questions on anything before we close up tonight? Yeah. Appreciate y'all interjection and discussion. And good to all. Okay, so